So I'm afraid that we won't have enough time for breakout rooms. So we might do, oh, actually, let me stop sharing here. We might do, continue the discussion as, just as a one group here. Let me just get to the right slide and we'll continue.
Can I ask a question, Nat?
Yes, please.
I'm just curious because there were 2 or 3 people that felt swamped, overwhelmed, distracted. I'm curious if they still feel that way, if this made it better or worse, or just where their heads at. I'm just curious.
Oh, no difference. This was a good distraction is probably one way to put it. Look, one comment just while I've gone off mute for the moment. One comment that I was noticing as we were going through things is there's a lot of these discussions that we still put on those individuals that are in that minority or in that group to say, call it out, make a difference and let us know.
Yeah.
There's a couple of occasions where I've found the need where people are so used to that misbehavior that they just don't notice it anymore. So I actually had a couple of my leadership team, a project manager and a product manager in session with one of our vendors, and they called me into it saying, look, we're really struggling here. We don't know what's going on here. Can you come in and just observe what's happening and let us know? And honestly, the misogyny that was coming from the vendor side shocked me, right? And I kind of came out of that session kind of going, do you feel like, there was sexual bias here going on? No, I didn't really realize it. And I kind of went through and I saw this and I saw this and I saw this and I saw this and I saw that. And I wanted to check first that they felt it or saw it before I did anything about it, because, the last thing you want to do is jump on something that somebody doesn't see as a problem. And once they kind of realized that, they realized what was going on as well. And they were just so used to that behavior that it just didn't jump out at them. I had a follow-up session with the vendor to work through that and kind of go, this isn't acceptable and you need to change. But it was a realization for me that quite often, I'm repeating myself a little bit, but people get so used to that they often need other people to help. So that sponsorship element that you're talking about isn't just about sponsorship of the individual. It's about sponsorship of the behavior. It's about sponsorship of the environment that you actually want to see.
Amen. No, and that's that calling out that behavior. And we just haven't done that. And I think there's 2 things we can do. Is one, we can do what you did, which was literally calling out the behavior. But we can also correct in the moment, right? It's so powerful when you're willing to be courageous. I mean, the example that I always get from women and from some men as well. I always thought it was a woman thing, but it's actually happened to men as well, where you'll say something, give an idea, and it just kind of gets ignored. And then 5 minutes later, someone of power literally brings up the same idea and everyone thinks it's, rocket science. Oh my God, that's the most amazing idea. And I saw this happening to myself. And when it happens to you, you don't want to do anything. But when I saw it happen to someone else and everyone was great, I said, hey, can I say something? And, I got called and I said, I love the idea that Bob just said, because I loved it when Mary said it 5 minutes ago. So how about if Mary and Tom worked together and came back to all of us with a plan? And the first time I did that, you could see it. Everyone knew exactly what just happened. But it worked. And I thought, oh my God, that was so simple, and I've done that many times since then. And I'm constantly telling them, just do that. And it totally kind of pops the bubble of the person who knew they were repeating the idea, even if it was subconscious, but I think.
I think it takes courage and takes, I think going back to your values, what do you believe, what do you think is the right thing to do, right? Tony, I don't know, I'm assuming that was your motivation, right? Something really.
But you also felt safe to do that, right? I think part of that is I only did that because I knew I wasn't going to be punished. So you felt safe to do that because you knew you weren't going to have repercussions against you. So there's that safety thing still comes in.
Yeah, look, there were, just to touch on that a little bit, there were potential repercussions there because this was a vendor, and if I didn't handle it right, we would have lost X amount of dollars, and I had to call into that. But I also didn't want to, I made a deliberate choice not to do it on the spot because I didn't know how my 2 women would handle that and a call out as to whether they actually saw it or not. So I took the approach of saying, I need to check in on that first and then I can act, because if they weren't comfortable with me calling that out or talking to it, then that would have been a different level of conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Tony. Just conscious of time, so I'll fly through these slides. So next events we have Margaret talked about listening today. We have Oscar Trimbola. He's launching his second book about listening. His first book years ago was Deep Listening, and now he's just published this month, next month actually, How to Listen. So next month, and in Jan, after the break, we have Charles, who used to work for Microsoft in the L&D space, and he'll be talking about growth mindset applied to mindfulness and the experience of the program at Microsoft. So we'll skip these, so we don't have a breakout room today, but some of the questions that I had in mind for the breakout room, and maybe we can have a little bit of a discussion, we still have maybe 5 minutes or 5 or 10 minutes or so, are the ones you see on the screen. I guess one point that I wanted to highlight, as Margaret mentioned and I touched on as well, is that diversity goes, is way beyond gender. Typically, we talk about gender diversity. That's, I think, the first thing, and ethnicity, but I know it's way beyond. So I think this diagram from diversity in Australia illustrate that quite well. So some of the questions that I had in mind for the breakout room discussions are the ones that you see on the screen. So why diversity and inclusion is important in the first place? How diverse and inclusive do you think your team is, your organization is, and what are the consequences of that, in a positive and a negative light? Initiatives, do you have any initiatives in place that you'd like to share, successful or perhaps unsuccessful? And either way, what, hopefully inspired by Margaret today, what is maybe the one baby step, maybe one action that you like to take? Because it's all well and good, we hear, we learn from others, but ideally we'll leave this session today inspired to do something slightly different in relation to what we discussed today. So that's the invitation, and we would have a mirror board in the breakout room. So I'll just stop sharing here and just open floor, open invitation to anyone to jump in and share your thoughts around those questions. And don't speak all at once, please.
I thought it would be worth mentioning, Nat, that something that I forget about and have to remind myself sometimes is that people can have more than one. So it's always not just women, it's not just neurodiverse, it's not just, sexual orientation. People can be, have diversity on several levels, which can make things even more interesting sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, true. And I don't know if you're keen to talk about, Suzanne, you're more than welcome. Neurodiversity combined with others, which is so common nowadays. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And thanks for this.
Sorry.
Go on, Zach.
What I want to say is, I think for me, it always begins with the psychologically safe space and bringing you into it. And what I've seen many times over in many workplaces is that people, because this world is not psychologically safe, don't assume that the workplace they're coming to is a psychologically safe space. So the first thing I'm going through with every new employee is making them actually feel safe, giving them the trust and the feeling that they can be themselves. And that is not something that's done in one conversation. People are skeptical. People have been hurt many times over. And of course, they start protecting themselves. They're not bringing themselves to it. They're on probation, they fear for their job, whatever it is. So it starts with me, bringing me to this room, and also in a one-to-one conversation, be myself, open up, show some of my emotions, my thinking. And I'm not most eloquent, and I'm not master of the English language, and I'm not I'm somewhere on the spectrum as well, so I'm very direct in some things. I'm German and might be tipping to wrong words, but that's me. And I talk about this, and I talk openly about this, and I also admit that I don't have all the answers, I don't have all the knowledge and all the skills, although I might be on that level where I am today. I'm just a human being. And that takes a lot of time and effort, and I try to coach this to my team leaders, who then bring in new team members as well, because this is where it starts. And only then can we have a constructive conversation around what does diversity and inclusion mean to us as an organization.
Thanks, Zach. Chris, without putting you on the spot, but I love actually putting you on the spot. I'm curious, what are your thoughts? It's their very first time here with us. Venkat as well, and Darren. Yeah, let's call the quiet ones. And thanks, Margaret. I think we need agreement for this group. Indeed, I'll work on that. Promise.
Thanks, Nat. Firstly, I must apologize. I was struggling to find the raise hand icon here. I'm so used to Microsoft Teams. But firstly, a great session. Thanks a lot, Margaret, for that. Absolutely love the leadership principles and the social agreements. And it's a shame I had to drop midway and rejoin. I had to take an office call. I think you were spot on, Nat, when you said that most often diversity is almost equated with gender balancing primarily, but there's more to it, as Margaret covered. One thing I'm consciously trying to imbibe in, within my small team is, as I think Zach mentioned, trust is extremely important. And when there is trust, a lot of these things tend to fall in place a lot more faster, and it tends to get a little bit more easier. So one thing we consciously try to put into practice is the ease with which people are allowed to say, I don't know. If it's a particular topic which people are talking about, being able to say, I don't know is the first step, in my opinion, because that pretty much uncovers the mask and nobody needs to pretend any further. They can dig in, find the answers and get back. That to me was, it brought in a sense of inclusion, because I think it was Zach or someone that mentioned that there are several layers to this. I may be good at one topic, but if I'm in a call, in a meeting where I'm not well conversant with the topic, I probably may not be feeling as included as I am in other groups. So I think letting people say, I don't know, being transparent, as Margaret mentioned, letting people be transparent and authentic is extremely, extremely important. But thanks a lot. I can't wait to go through the recording, to go through other aspects apart from social agreement. Thank you.
Thanks, Venkat. Darren and Chris, any thoughts, any 2 cents you'd like to add?
I think for me, it's that old thing about, does the fish know it's swimming in water? And, I can remember when I turned 50, I was between marriages, and someone I worked with tried to hook me up with someone who I really liked and knew in the workplace. And we were about to go out, and she said to my friend, well, how old is Chris? And she said, oh, he just turned 50. She said, oh, never mind. And I heard about this and I go, what the hell? And then all of a sudden I realized this is what people have been feeling their whole damn life. This is, making an attribution about me based on one element. Could be my skin color, could be my gender, could be my sexuality. And I'm a tall British Canadian who my whole life, because I'm verbal and white and wore glasses and were prematurely gray, got a whole bunch of positive stuff that I didn't even know I was getting until it was whipped away from me based on one thing. And it was my birthday. And, it was a shock. And then I started to think about it. And I mainly worked in North America, in Canada and the US. And I started working as an expat in Africa and Asia, and now in Central Asia, and now living in Australia. And I realized there is so much about this that you just don't see. And being an expat violates almost everything. I mean, I feel embarrassed sometimes to be an expat because I've been parachuted in, paid 4 times the amount of everyone else to do something that they should be able to do. And my job is to make it so they can do it. And now I can't get the rest of the leadership to look at the fact that, no, they're not expats, but they could be the CIO after me. And it's, my background is actually psychology, but I cannot believe the culture effect and how difficult it is to break through all that, because we don't see what we don't see. And this was a great discussion, and it brought up many things for me that made me think twice. But one other quick thing I'll tell you is I eventually did marry someone from Central Asia, and I'm now neck deep in this culture where I am the visible minority. I've been now at the Visible Hour for the last 7 years. And I keep thinking, I was in Pakistan for 8 years as a CIO there. And I never knew what it was like until I married someone who's Pakistani. And then I started to understand the culture.
Mhm.
I mean, you just,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a course where I'll never be able to pass the final exam, honestly. Being open to people's differences and creating a scenario where they can say stuff, where there aren't a whole bunch of hidden pressing down on them, because you don't see that they're pressing down on them.
Thanks
So thank you very much.
Thanks so much for sharing, Chris, so openly. Really appreciate. And I think it links somehow. I see the connection with what Margaret mentioned before. You know, the unconscious bias is often lack of exposure as well. If we don't have exposure, we don't understand. And if we don't understand, it's hard to have empathy. So being curious, as Margaret was saying, can be so important, and have the curiosity to learn about people in different backgrounds. Thank you. Darren.
I'll just be conscious of the time and say thank you. That was extremely insightful. I see we've got 5 minutes left, so I shall leave it at that.
You don't need to be that brief, Darren, but that's okay. All right. So
can I just not? I know maybe spoke
yes,
about this
please do.
in the group before, but not to all of them. There is a nice exercise I try to bring up every time when it comes to diversion. I learned about it at a meetup, and it's so powerful. I always bring it up. It's an exercise. You have a strong box in the room. It has 4 locks on each side, one lock on each side. It's a number lock. And when people come into the room, just give them a color tag by random. And then you ask 4 people of the same color, please come forward. Each side of the box has a color, and they should stand on that side of the box with their color. And they're not allowed to move around the box. And they have to open that box, but there are 4 locks on each side, and they can't look around it. Each side of the box also has some numbers about the numbered code for the locks, but for the lock on the other side. So try as they might, it's time to, of course, they will fail because they can't get all the numbers. And then you do the same exercise, bringing 4 people forward, each of a different color, and each person is therefore standing in front of a different side of the box. And what they have to do, of course, is they need to cooperate. They need to tell each other what numbers they see. And of course, they will crack it open. And it's such a powerful exercise, I find, because it symbolizes that looking at a problem, at a situation, whatever it is, from different angles is so much more effective and efficient if you work together as a team and bring to the table different qualities, different attributes, no matter what it might be. It's a great little exercise, and it's very, very powerful. Just wanted to bring it up.
Amazing. Thank you, Zach. Very useful. If you have something written, basic instructions or an article, so maybe on your next article on LinkedIn, Zach, that could be a good one. Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much, everyone. I think, yeah, time is almost up. So the very last thing, thanks, Suzanne. Would be great to, especially from the new members, to hear your thoughts, feedback on what we did well, what we could do better for next roundtable. So if you could take a couple of minutes to answer, there are only 4 or 5 questions in the survey real quick, we really appreciate it. And if you don't do it, I'll probably will chase you tomorrow and ask, please, 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 on LinkedIn, complete a survey. And yeah, and other than that, please help us to spread the word so we have more people join these conversations. We'll publish the recording probably tomorrow, so feel free to share with your peers. Yeah, look forward to see you in future roundtables. So thanks so much again, Margaret, not just for taking the time to prepare, to spend time with us and stay until the very end. It's been a pleasure, an honor.
Nice to meet all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Nat.
Bye.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Cheers.
Bye.